name is Audra Lambert, and I'm the curator at the New Harmony Gallery of Contemporary Art. I'm here to welcome Anna Tsouhlarakis, who is our visiting artist here today, and I wanted to start off by saying thank you, Anna, for coming all the way from Colorado to be with us here today. So Anna's work is a part of encountering Io Palmer, Anna Tsouhlarakis, and Pavlina Vagioni, who's also here with us today in the back row. So this is our newest exhibit that opens tomorrow. The opening reception is from 3 to 5 p.m. tomorrow at the gallery. Free and open to the public as always. We have refreshments. The artist will also be speaking on the work on view in the exhibit. So if you know of anyone that wants to come along, or if you're free, we do welcome you to join us tomorrow. And if you are unable to make it tomorrow, the exhibit's up through April 12th. And please do keep in mind our hours are 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Tuesday through Saturday. So the exhibit Encountering explores themes related to trade and exchange, and also the points where this happens, and where these activities physically take place. So this phenomenon has happened worldwide since early civilization, here in the Americas, in what is now China, along the Mediterranean and the Silk Road, and right here in New Harmony, with the two earliest Harmonist and Owen and McClure communities here. We moved here to trade and exchange both products and ideas. So Encountering offers materiality as the medium through which these ideas are expressed. So I welcome you to come and see the exhibit because I hope you'll make your own sense of a personal connection to the materials that are involved. It is a mixed media sculpture installation show, so there is a lot to see. That being said, I wanted to give a short introduction to Anna and read her bio, and then I'll hand it over to her for her presentation today. So, Anna Tsouhlarakis is Navajo Creek and Greek and works in sculpture, installation, video, and performance. She received her BA from Dartmouth College with degrees in Native American Studies and Studio Art. She went on to receive her MFA from Yale University in sculpture. Her work has been part of national and international exhibitions at venues including the Neon Foundation in Athens, Greece, White Frame, which is in Basel, Switzerland, the Art Gallery in Ontario in Toronto, the National Museum of Art, which is at Duke University, at Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art, the Museum of Contemporary Native Art, the Scottsdale Museum of Contemporary Art, the National Museum of the American Indian, National Portrait Gallery, and a recent solo exhibit at MCA Denver. In May 2024, she had a solo presentation with Tilton, which is a gallery, at the Independent Art Fair in New York City. Tsouhlarakis has participated in various art residencies, including the Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture, Yaddo McDowell, and was the Andrew W. Mellon Artist in Residence at Colorado College for the 2019-2020 academic year. She was awarded a Creative Capital Grant in 2021 and received a 2022 Louis Comfort Tiffany Foundation Award. Most recently, she was awarded a Smithsonian Artist Research Fellowship, and she lives in between Colorado and Maine. So hopefully there will be some questions after the talk, but for now I'll hand it over to Anna. Thank you.
Thank you all for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. Is it all right if I hold it?
Yeah.
Okay. The opportunity to be here. My first time in New Harmony. I've been to Indiana a couple of times. I've driven through it a lot. You may have some independent spirit with your time zone, right? Okay. Which sounds like it's kind of in the spirit of New Harmony and how it was founded. So I am Native American and Greek. I'm now an enrolled citizen of the Navajo Nation. I'm also of Creek descent and Greek descent. So when you think about art making, we're kind of addressing those kind of issues. And so it was really exciting for me to begin working this way and to realize that it was successful in like the creation and like the production of my ideas. And so this is another piece from early on. This is called Travois. And this was influenced a lot by Edward Curtis photographs. So you know those big coffee table books that Edward Curtis photographs are now in. He was if you don't know him, he's a white photographer that came across the West during the mid to late 1800s and took photographs of a lot of different tribes. I was always struck specifically by the photographs he took in the Northern Plains. And some of the photographs that I was thinking about when I made this piece were photographs of I think they were the Crow tribe that had travois. I mean, there are a lot of tribes that use travois, but they're this kind of system of transportation and hauling personal items that they would hook onto horses and dogs. And I was feeling very nomadic at this time because, Navajos are specifically from the Southwest, from the Four Corners area. My family's from the Navajo reservation in the New Mexico side. And so, a lot of people at home had moved away from home or kind of had gone to school away from home. And so it was a big deal that I was all the way out in New Hampshire. And I spent a lot of time going back and forth all the time. And so it was always hard to have a sense of place and a sense of kind of identity to land and to space in that way for me. And so I was always kind of struggling with that, kind of going back and forth. And so that's what was really came out in this piece, and I felt culminated those feelings. And so I made a travois that fit exactly to me, that had kind of my personal belongings from my dorm. It was made out of just found wood from the forest that was held together with duct tape and just kind of random kind of items. And when I showed this in the gallery for a critique for my senior show, some of the students that were there said, "So when are you going to use it?" And I had never really thought about that. In my mind, it was just a sculpture that was leaning up against the wall. But I realized then that, this is meant for performance. It can be taken into action. And it was something I'd never done with my work before. And so this was the first performance piece I ever did. And I was really nervous. I mean, not just the performative side of it all, but also this idea of engaging with traffic. I knew that I had to do that to make this work as a piece, but I was scared because I'm a dark-skinned woman, that was young, very young, and then in this very white, New England town. And so that's actually my license plate from my car. I took that off of there and put that on there. So I was well, it looks something's legal, right? And so that was kind of my way to kind of rectify, making it be okay in some way. And so I was really nervous, very hesitant, very anxious, but it worked out, and I was really happy with the way it turned out. And so throughout the 2000s, I experimented a lot with material, with kind of different forms of storytelling, thinking about kind of futurism. Before it's really big now within a lot of kind of art kind of scenes, this idea of specifically indigenous futurism. But this was, 2007, before anybody had kind of uttered those words before. And so, it was my take on it using duct tape. And so these are all stills from different performances. So I did about 8 in all. And something that I also didn't talk about with my father, but that I think comes out a lot in the work, is that growing up and seeing him working all the time and seeing all of the art that was in the museums made by natives and that was being sold at the different markets that we went to and whatnot, was how beautiful everything was. How precise everything was and exact. And while I appreciated that and I respected that, I also thought, why can't we just make things that feel a little bit more casual? Why does everything have to be so beautiful? Can't it just be ugly or okay? I was really pushing back on the idea of the aesthetic definition surrounding Native art. And so you can kind of see that quality, I've never really worried about making things well. And I've always been concerned about making things that look too exact. And I think that actually comes out a lot, like, you might not notice that initially when you see my 3 pieces that are here in the gallery in New Harmony, but once you walk up to it, it's like, oh, did she mean to like not clean this? It was outside, and this was in the big sculpture yard behind the museum in Santa Fe. And so it was gonna be up for 3 months, and I knew that it needed to survive, right? And so that's when like, I was like, okay, I wanna do text, but it has to be probably on some sort of like, you know, tough signage, and so that's where the idea of the aluminum came in. And I just like the kind of safety, when I was looking for signs, this idea of the safety signs that kind of kept popping up. And I like the use of all caps. There was something about that made it feel very like confident and very, I don't know, just like authoritative, right? Like in the way that it was speaking. And so it's something that I've kind of gone on and like kept using within my work. So in 2019 to 2020, I was invited to be the artist in residence at Colorado College, which is a small liberal arts college in Colorado Springs. And it was an amazing year. I was invited to just come and have a studio and make work in their museum, and they gave me a salary and benefits and moved me and my family out. It was just like the best opportunity an artist could possibly imagine. It was really cool. And they were like, you can use the museum however you want, like for research or the library, like all of these different things. And so, well, that was all great. One of the nicest things was to be around just the people that worked in the museum and have interesting conversations and dialogue. This was also during the time that kind of the Black Lives Matter movement was starting up. And so we would be talking about just like what they were dealing with in their work, like the, you know, trials and tribulations. And something that came up that was pretty consistent was anytime they were making new signage in the museum was, you know, when it came to like the labeling, like over there, or like what you see right when you walk in, was how do you impart information to the viewers or the audience that you want them to leave with, right? Everybody's gonna have a different experience, you know, no matter on what they see, but how can they help kind of like direct you into like maybe certain themes or ideas? And so that was something we talked a lot about, like in terms of their signage, in terms of the way they train their volunteers, like how to speak about things or how to answer questions. And so it really made me think about kind of, because Black Lives Matter was, you know, kind of coming up more and more, like these things that were happening across the country, I started thinking about like, how would you do that with race relations? And how would you do that specifically in terms of like Native people? And I had taught second grade and randomly a long time ago. And one of the pedagogies we learned is called responsive classroom. And it's basically the idea of positive reinforcement, right? Like if Jimmy's over there sitting with his legs crossed and saying, oh my gosh, you're doing such a great job, Jimmy. And then like somebody else is running around, they're gonna wanna go get that praise too. So they wanna go and sit just like Jimmy is. And so I thought of these text pieces, of kind of putting these text pieces out into the world that kind of did something similar. And so these are billboards that were placed around Colorado Springs in very high traffic areas. This one was in downtown Colorado Springs on top of a big building, and this one was like along one of the major highways. And I didn't want anything about me to be on there. I wanted it to be like, I didn't want it to be like, oh, this is, you know, something by Anna Tsouhlarakis. I didn't want it to be about, you know, an angry brown woman. Like I didn't want there to be those types of signifiers on it. So I wanted it just to be as plain as possible to get this text out there. Like as we know with any sort of billboard, like sometimes you see things that are like super stupid and you're like, oh my God, and you like turn away or whatever, but it's like, but for that moment you're captured whether or not you mean to or not. And that's what I find like very intriguing, is that I might have your attention for a half second and what can I do with that, right? And so that's where these came from. And while my initial, like, very beginning ideas were very, like, positive and, like, about that idea of positive reinforcement, I realized very quickly that they can come off as very snarky, too. Like, you can read them in a completely different way, like I'm making fun of you. And I love that, too. And early on, you know, when I was thinking about what font to use, I don't know if any of you have seen that documentary, Helvetica. It's great if you haven't. It seems insane to watch a documentary about font and typeface, but I knew that that's what I wanted to use. So all of my text is always done in Helvetica bold. And so while I was doing these, I felt like I was excited to get these out to the world, but I had come up with a lot more. I had talked with a lot of friends. I have a lot of friends who aren't artists, and those are the people I kind of rely on the most to, like, bounce ideas off of, and then they'll give me, you know, they're like, oh, this is the way you're working, and then they have ideas, and they send. So I ended up having 23 of these in total. And so I wanted to get them out into the world, but, you know, I didn't have the budget of doing 23 big billboards. So I opened 2 accounts on, one on Instagram and one on Facebook, these business accounts. And you can send your posts out as advertisements, right? And you can pick who they go to. And so it's like, it's crazy how specific you can be. Like, I could say, okay, I want this piece or this post to go out to women between the ages of 25 and 35 shopping for handbags in Florida. And so as they're scrolling, like, in whatever they're doing, you know, any social media, this will just, like, randomly pop up, right? And so it's that same idea of me just invading people's space just for a moment. And you can click on it, but it just takes you to this page. It doesn't have any other information of what to do, of anything that you can do. And people liked it, people commented, but it was really cool. So I did about 3 or 4 of these per day for the whole month of November of 2019, which is Native American Heritage Month. It was really cool because I got to see the analytics that over 35,000 people interacted with these in some way. So that means they clicked on it, they, like, hovered it, they, like, liked it or did something with it. And so they forwarded it to people. And so that was really neat to see the response, like, in terms of, like, actual data. And so this whole project I call the Native Guide Project. That name just comes from, like, the historical kind of place of Native women as Native guides throughout our national history, right? Like Sacagawea and Pocahontas and Malinche, and so you have this history. And so I was like, I'm like the Native guide. So that's where that comes from. And it's something that, in addition to my other work that I do, like my sculptural work, my video work, this has really become, like, a consistent part of my practice. It was there throughout the, you know, past few decades, but really since 2019 has been a much bigger part of my practice. And so this was at the Scottsdale Museum of Contemporary Art. They showed this piece blown up kind of in the gallery, and then on that wall they had a live feed of the Instagram kind of post going, and then throughout the kind of downtown Phoenix metro area they had digital billboards. And so there were digital billboards that were, I think there were 3 of them throughout the metro area that had text pieces kind of like rotating on them as well. And so this is my favorite one. I just like, and I'm not thinking of like dreams of bowls, I'm thinking of like dreams that people have at night. And I just think it's like a really sweet thing to think of. Like, we don't, like when we think of like an other, we don't think about like, what do they dream about at night, you know? Or they dream about their puppies that they had when they were young, I don't know. And it's just like, I think it's a nice moment and a nice thing to kind of think about and consider. So it's my favorite one. And so since then, I've been asked to create different iterations of it as well. And so have kind of the ongoing kind of general Native Guide project, but this one was commissioned by the university, or what is it called? The Ohio State University, and the Wexner Center for the Arts that they have there. And so I did a whole bunch of interior pieces that were in the lobby, but then I did a lot of these large banner pieces that were on the exterior of their museum. And they were really excited about this project and kept pushing. Like, initially all I was supposed to do was a lobby installation, and then when I got there, I was like, oh, that's cool. Those squares kind of remind me of the Instagram post. And they're like, we can make banners. And so then we ended up making banners and placing them around the area. And then they were like, hey, we have access to these digital advertising monitors all around downtown Columbus, Ohio. And so there were 53 or 63 of these all around this whole like area, the arts district. And so for 6 months, my text pieces were rotating with the advertisements, like through, just like, you know, John's Burger King or whatever, you know, along, and then you would see something like this. And that just like piled up over the millennia. And so when I was making these pieces, I did more research in the area, and I realized that right around where this botanical gardens is right against, it's like on a river as well, a tidal river, and there were other smaller bins there, like maybe some that are like this tall, you know. And so this was an area that a lot of them would come to for oysters. And so I wanted to kind of, because most people don't know, even people that grew up in Maine and have been in Maine for a long time don't know about these middens. And so I wanted to kind of bring them to kind of, like to highlight them within the space, because it is local, even just to this little area. And then in those pieces of granite, you can see that there's engraved in like the text pieces. So it was really a big thing for me to try to have it be part of the land, have it make sense in the botanical gardens. And so I was, and because this is like where I summer every summer, that it was like really close, like I wanted it to be something that made sense. Yeah.
How high or how tall are these?
The tallest one is my height, so that one's 5'5", or I think I'm 5'5", but apparently I'm shrinking. Yeah. And you can walk on these. So when these pictures were taken, there's kind of like a little string around them, but because they were getting the sod to set. But now, like, people can walk on. Like, that was my dream, was like kids would like run up them and like, I mean, ideally not jump off the top, but I was like, see, I put that rock there so you can jump on that. And so, because I wanted them to be interactive in that way.
And these are permanent installations.
They are permanent, but also knowing that permanent can mean a lot of things when something's outdoor. Like, they might be up for like 3 years, depending on how, just like the, we're in the contract, it's like they're permanent depending on upkeep, and we'll revisit in 3 years. Like, so for 3 years, they're gonna be up for sure. But if the upkeep's like really insane, like they keep having to replace the saw, you know, like, or do anything like, then we'll probably have to think, you know, rethink it or take it down or something. So, yeah. So it's a working definition of permanent. And so there's another one. So there were 4 in total. So, during this time, like that I've been making these text pieces, I also do, like I said, a lot of sculpture, a lot of installation, and there was a point where I really wanted to try to bring these two parts of my practice together in a more direct way, like the sculpture and the text, because it had been so separate. And so, and this is before I did this, so this is actually just from this past, like a few months ago. This is from 2023. And so this is a big show I had at the Museum of Contemporary Art Denver. It was funded by a big kind of national award called the Creative Capital Award, which is $50,000 to basically create the exhibition of your dreams. And so this exhibition was called Indigenous Absurdities. And the idea of it was to focus on themes of humor and specifically like humor within Native communities, like the idea of teasing, of like roasting. I mean, I'm talking about Native communities, but I think like we all have that in our own way, in our own families, in our own communities, about how people connect through humor, or basically like making fun of each other, right? Like that's kind of what this was about. And so with this piece, it's called She Must Be a Matriarch. I hadn't really paid that much attention to titles before. I hadn't really thought of that as being a big part of my artwork. But with this show, that's when titles started becoming just as important as the pieces themselves, and I think inform them to what they're really about. And so all of the titles are in all caps, and to me, they're basically a text extension of the sculptures. And so, and it, like I had noticed throughout my, my whole time working as an artist too, that there's always been like a strain of humor throughout a lot of things. Like I don't like taking myself too seriously. I want my work to be able to have kind of like a fun edge to it, or like kind of a goofy edge to it. And this is what came out of that, was the sculptures and the text kind of coming together. So these are close-ups of that. And then this is a sculpture. The sculpture is called She Thinks She's Too Good. So it's like a beer keg, a stack of books. And I use a lot of IKEA remnants in my work as well. And then these are the first big, I just needed to make some work about this. And so that's what these pieces where they came from. So these next three pieces are are in the show. And so they're not quite this big. They're 30 inches by 40 inches. But what I was thinking about was specifically, there was a very vocal group called Navajos for Trump. And they were, they flew out for the inauguration, they went to the parade, and they've been very active, like on social media, within the news and whatnot. And I really started thinking, when we had all of these kind of policy changes and executive orders and everything, if their vote, like, if they felt differently now, or if they were affected by what's going on now, and like, 5 or 10 years from now, or even like 50 years from now, how will we look back on this time? And so I started thinking about just like, what it made me kind of think about was like cautionary tales that you have in different cultures of like, why does the bunny have like a short little puffy tail? Because it got cut off because it was too curious or something like that. And so that's where these kind of come from. And that's what I was thinking about a lot, where, that look in retrospect, how our feelings might be different about what's going on, or, what people did. And it's not, and I'm not looking back and saying, like, I blame you for this, but it's like trying to see things from their perspective and not, like, just trying to deal with all of that in some way. So there's their actual saws. So it is very like kind of mixed media. So this is the final piece. Thank you.